Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, how the heck are you? By the time you are hearing this, we'll be already into April. How's it going? Today, I want to talk to you about, if you're a longtime listener, you've heard that my husband goes to Laughlin. If you don't know what Laughlin is, it's like a little podunk Las Vegas. He likes to gamble when he goes by himself. He golfs. He goes a couple times a year. He loves to go by himself, and he has a friend that he goes with. And if you're a longtime listener, and we've been married 26 years. I think he's been going since we got together. So this has been happening for a long time. And in the early years, a lot of my attachment wounds were up, and it was hard for me when he left. I was really afraid that I wouldn't be able to manage and keep up with things while he was gone. I really tried to make lots of plans so that I felt like I was anchored into people. We would talk every day. It was important to me. The people that were close to me in the early days would stay connected. When the boys were little, I remember needing help because I just didn't feel like I could manage the boys by myself when he was gone, just because it's a lot. And we really do share a lot of the workload. And Steve went to Laughlin in January of this year. And again, I made plans. Historically, I've been married 26 years. This is before I was married, but historically, I've gone through periods where I have not managed very well, that the dishes pile up so bad that I get overwhelmed and my mom would have to come over and help me. And wouldn't surprise me in retrospect if I hadn't gone through some autistic burnout between that and my ADHD and staying on top of things, where either I'm going to frame it in terms of my autism, keeps everything in check and very well organized, which I like, but that takes energy, or my ADHD takes over and I just don't do stuff. So there's always this underlying fear that if I don't, like this tension, if I don't force myself to stay on top of things, that things are going to pile up and then I'm going to get overwhelmed and I'm not going to be able to function. And this time when Steve left, I didn't make any plans, and I was a little bit concerned about it, but I just trusted that it would be okay. We always go grocery shopping before he leaves so that I've got plenty of food in the house for when he's gone, and I don't have to go out and get anything if I don't want to. And I get snacks. Like, he goes on vacation and I get to have a party vacation from my mouth. And we had gone earlier this time. I think he left on Sunday, and on Wednesday we went to Sprouts and I got a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to eat all this stuff before you leave. So he offered, not that he has to hide food from me, but he offered to put it away out of sight so that I wouldn't have it until he left, which wasn't him being controlling. It was a polite thing for him to do. I kept talking about my snacks. And on the Sunday that he left, my intention was to take the dog to Fiesta Island for a long walk and to get up and do all these things. And I woke up and just didn't have the energy. And part of my self-care generally is to take a shower and get dressed, even if I don't do something that just makes me feel like I started the day. Some of this is self-care. Some of this is driven by fear. And I'm not indicating that it's good, it's bad. If you identify with this, I'm not implying that I know what motivates you or drives you to do things or not do things. So my hope is that you don't feel that I'm judging you and what you do, because I'm really speaking about my own experiences here. But I ended up not taking a shower. I stayed in my pajamas all day long, and I ate pretty much all of the snacks for the whole week in one day. Did not walk the dog. And generally, we walk the dog twice a day. Or Steve takes her to dog park and, we walk her one other time. So in my catastrophic thinking, great, I'm going to be in my pajamas all week. I'm going to eat everything that there is in the house. I'm not going to shower. I'm not going to brush my teeth, and the dog will never be let out or taken out. We have a dog door. And I just kind of let it be okay. And I talked to Jen, and I think Steve and I talked. I'm like, I pretty much ate all the snacks today, and was a little bit concerned about what was going to happen the next day. I did have clients. And as it turns out, I got up the next day and I took a shower and I made my bed and I took the dog for a walk, which surprised me. And I just allowed the week to unfold as it needed to unfold. And coming out of burnout, Steve and I get along very well. He doesn't make a lot of demands on me. We have a very comfortable and easy relationship. There is something about not being perceived. If you are autistic, if you're neurodivergent, having somebody in your space and just being perceived can activate your nervous system. And part of what I really enjoyed for the week was not having to think about, if I turn on music, if I turn on the TV, if I want to do this, do I need to consider anybody else? And I was raised to consider everybody else in the environment, and that often restricts what I want and what I do. And it was nice to not have to think about anybody all week long and to just do whatever felt right to me. And what I found was my nervous system was incredibly regulated. And I didn't walk the dog every day because she has this thing where she doesn't like getting her harness on. And because she's a smaller dog, they have a soft trachea. And if you put a leash to their collar and they pull, it can hurt their trachea. So we've switched to a harness that is the least restrictive. But she does this thing where she runs when we want to take a walk. And the first day she did it, I just didn't have the room for it. And I really didn't want to take a walk. But it means for me that I have to get ready. I have to put on shoes. I have to get prepared to go out. And she didn't want to go for a walk. And I thought, all right, I'm just going to go out and take a walk because I want to send the message that when it's time to walk, if you don't go, I'm going. So I went and took a walk and came back. The next day, the same thing happened where she resisted, and I'm like, that's fine. I'm just not going to worry about it. I actually took myself for a walk again, which surprised me because I generally do not really enjoy walking, but I just did. I think the next time that I went to go for a walk, she did not run and she stayed in one spot, and I was able to get the harness on her. The other thing that happened is a relative of ours went on hospice this week when Steve was gone, and my intention was to go over and visit, and I just didn't have it in me. And I have this very strong value about when things like this happen, you just show up for people. There is no choice. You show up. And if I really got clear on what it was that I was needing, that was not it for a number of reasons. And I really struggled with some guilt about I may not be able to say goodbye. I have no idea how coherent and alert this person was when they went on hospice. And what it brought up for me is I would never want, this is part of my PDA, pathological demand avoidance, or persistent or pervasive drive for autonomy, which is my need to have low demands and to have a big sense of autonomy over the decisions that I make, the demands that other people make on me and that I make on myself. And I've said this before, but if you have a PDA profile, you also value and honor other people's autonomy. And what I realized was, unless I had a specific request of somebody to come see me on my deathbed, I do not want anybody showing up for me if they don't have it in them. I respect and trust and honor other people's autonomy, that if you can't do it, that's okay. I want you to take care of yourself. And that is a very, very strong value of mine. And even when Jen and I go to record, I mean, today was an example. We already did a recording. I'm just sitting down to do another one, but she has some health things going on. And so I said, are you up to recording today? And I only want people to show up because they want to. And because I have a very limited capacity, when other people are kind and allow me that time to rest or honor where I'm at, it really means a lot to me. And I had to let it be okay that I didn't go. And the next day, the person died. The truth is they were on hospice for 2 days. And if you know anything about hospice care, people wait too long. You can be on hospice for 6 months and they can recertify you. And some people have gone on hospice, gotten recertified, and then have gotten better and gone off hospice and die of something else. But because people wait so long, generally it's 2 weeks that people are on hospice before they die. And in this case, it was 2 days. So there's a very good chance that had I even gone, the person may not have even been awake or coherent enough to really be able to recognize me. And this segues into the next thing that I want to talk about is with my son going into the military, we are going to be taking care of his dog, Zeke. And I've had a concern about what is it going to be like for me to take care of Zeke and Maisie when Steve goes to Laughlin because I get overwhelmed. In the past, when we had Gracie and then we had Maisie, it was too much for me to walk both of them. I have to say that Gracie was blind and Maisie was a puppy. And so they had very different needs when I would walk them. And to try and do 4 walks a day just wasn't reasonable. And I did ask some neighbors to walk Gracie so I could walk Maisie. So I've had this concern about, what's that going to be like when Steve goes to Laughlin and I have Zeke? As it turns out, I got an emergency call from my son, and he needed me to take Zeke because of some things that were going on at his house, and they needed to not have Zeke there. And without a moment's hesitation, of course, I'm going to be there for my son. Of course, I'm going to take Zeke. And this is kind of on the heels of feeling guilty about not showing up for this relative that was on hospice. And what it meant was driving in traffic. I told Josh that I would meet him halfway. When there's traffic, he lives a little over 3 hours away. And of course, because this was an emergency, it was during rush hour. So we figured out a place to meet, and it meant driving in rush hour as the sun was going down a long amount of time at night when it's no bra o'clock. After I walk the dogs in the evening, I come home and it's officially no bra o'clock. But if I'm going out, then it's bra o'clock. And I'm very clear that I will be there for my son and for my kids in whatever capacity I can. And there was no doubt in my mind that this wasn't even an option. So I went and got Zeke and sat in traffic in the dark. It ended up being fine. And it really ended up being a joy having Zeke here. So my fear was it's going to be too much. I'm going to feel too overwhelmed with 2 dogs and having to walk them. And Zeke is just a different dog than Maisie. I love Maisie, but Zeke is very interactive. He likes affection. He likes to come up on the bed and be pet. It really has added so much in the novelty and the joy that I experienced having him here. And I'm grateful that it happened this way, because had we gotten Zeke and then Steve was going to Laughlin, I probably would have been concerned about, is it going to be too much for me to manage? And what I found during this week is at night, Steve does the kitchen, he does the dishes, he likes to clean everything up at night. I don't. I'm tired and I don't want to do it. And I'm happy to leave stuff in the sink and deal with it in the morning. I'm usually really mindful about making my bed, and I just didn't want to this week. I let things pile up. I really listened to what my rhythm was, and I trusted it. And it reminds me of, so if you have a history of an eating disorder, I'm just going to give you a little trigger warning that this may not be a great example, and it's not my intention to bring up any shame, but this resonates for me. If someone has an eating disorder and they're counting calories and they're counting every exercise and they are counting their macros and how much protein and fiber and everything is very, very regimented, and there's nothing about what is it that you want? What does your body need? Do you need to rest today? Do you need to do a different activity? Are you craving something? Is there something that would be soothing for you to have? And not doing any of that, because being highly regimented because of the rules and needing to adhere to a structure that has nothing to do with the person and what the person needs. And the other side of that recovery for me, if we're using an eating disorder analogy, is trusting that whether you exercise or not, your body will maintain its weight. If you indulge in something that feels yummy and comforting, your body will maintain its weight. And you may have little fluctuations, but in the big scheme of things, your life can be very expansive, and it doesn't have to be controlled by a very strict regimen that is not based on the person's needs, but about this rigid structure. And I feel like this is akin to what I experienced when Steve goes away, because I want to keep things orderly and I want to make the bed and I want to make sure that I'm walking the dog and that I'm showering and all of these things. And in this week, I just kind of let it all go and I trusted, and it really worked out, and I found my own rhythm, and it didn't look like what it normally looks like. On Saturday, I went to Aquafit. I wasn't even going to go, and I talked to my friend Jean, Soup Jean. And again, this is where my thinking is very extreme. I was a little tired. I walked probably 6.5 miles in the week because of Zeke being here. And when Zeke got here and it was time to go for a walk, Maisie knew that she'd get left behind. So she has really changed how she shows up and letting me get her harness on. She's still reluctant, but does not quite run away the way that she normally does. But I talked to Jean, and I really wasn't planning to go to Aquafit, but she said she might go for a half an hour. And, I think about classes from 9 to 10, and if you go for the whole class. And I thought, okay, I can go for half the class. And I did, and half the class was perfect. And I came home, and then we had talked about, she had given me some beans and rice and chili that she had made that was delicious and gave me the recipe. And I asked her, hey, do you have time, and can we run to the store and pick up the things that I don't have? And would you come over to my house and show me how to make it? She said, sure. And we made a plan to do this at noon. And I just was really tired. And she really encouraged me to rest. And so I told her that I was going to lay down for a little bit, and I'd let her know when I woke up. And it was sweet. I went to lay down in the front room, and Maisie and Zeke were both on the bed with me, which is incredibly comforting and soothing. I slept for 3.5 hours. I just must have been really tired. And when I got up, I was really too tired to go to the store and to do all the cooking. And I just needed one or two things. And she said she had them. So she brought what I didn't have over, and we did some cooking together. And she left, and I just really enjoyed myself. There's something too that Gracie used to always be in the office with me when I saw clients. She was generally on my lap, and I thought Maisie would be too, but Maisie just gets too restless. So I've brought Zeke into my office a couple times when I've had clients this week, and there's just something about seeing him sleeping on the bed while I have a client. It's really regulating to me. It's just very comforting. He's so sweet. He's so affectionate. And it's not that Maisie isn't a sweet dog. She just is not as people-oriented, which is fine. It's just different. So Steve and I were talking, I don't know, Friday night, and he was going to come back on Saturday, and he said, "How has it been having me gone?" And I said, I kind of like it. Just not something you're supposed to say if you're married. And he said, "I could stay another night." I'm like, "If you want to, go ahead." And he's like, "Really?" I said, "Of course." So he and his friend ended up staying an extra night. I was thrilled to have an extra night to myself. And this really has been the first time that I have really relaxed into the experience of taking up space, enjoying myself, my process, my needs. I did a few things socially. I stayed connected, but I really leaned into my own rhythm. And it's interesting. I didn't eat out during the week. On Sunday, I ate the snacks that I had here. For the most part, I just did not have a real buzz around food and eating. It reminded me of what I think people that like going on vacation experience when they go on vacation, that sense of just total relaxation and being in the rhythm. I didn't get activated during the week. It just was very peaceful. And I ended up having a little bit of concern about what the transition of having Steve coming back home was going to be like. So on Sunday late afternoon when he got home, I had some socks on and I opened the door to greet him, but I kept the dogs inside until he was out of the car so they could run out to greet him. Maisie was shaking and I let them go and they were very happy. And Steve asked if I had shoes on because I think he wanted some help bringing in some of the stuff from his trip, and I didn't. And as he's bringing his stuff in, it had been raining. And so he said, "You're going to need to wipe the dog's paws before they come inside." If you have PDA, you know where I'm going. If you don't have PDA, let me explain it to you. So pervasive or persistent drive for autonomy is about not being told or asked what to do and having very low demands. And this is coming on being alone Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and most of Sunday. And the first two things that my husband says to me are demands, asking if I have shoes on so I can help him, and then telling me that I need to wipe the dog's paws off. That did not go over very well, people. And I said to him, that was a pretty shirty thing to say. And initially he apologized. And then when we talked about it, he didn't understand what was wrong with that. And he said he was only joking. But at that point, I was pretty upset. I texted Jen. She had time to FaceTime. So I went into my bedroom and we FaceTime and I just cried. And what I suspect is happening is that I'm starting to make connections that I have not been able to make in the past. What I felt in the moment was I'm staying in my room for the rest of the night. I want to eat sweets. I just want to overeat and I'm not coming out of my room. That was me trying to maintain some sense of autonomy and control. I'm going to eat what I want. I'm going to eat when I want it. I'm going to eat as much as I want. I'm going to be alone. You can't get to me. You can't touch me. It's a disempowered part, but that's what was going on for me. I also really tried to lean into the feelings that I was having when I was crying about when have I felt this before and what goes on for me. And it really was this sense of I've had the whole house to myself and it felt very expansive. And now I felt like the only place for me was to stay in my room in a closed space because then nobody could get to me there. So I processed with Jen it was sweet. I had called Zeke in, so he was on the bed, so I was able to pet him. Again, with my sensory stuff, he's very soft. Maisie's a terrier, so she's very wiry. Just touching him and him being soft is very calming to me because he's responsive and he looks at me and I can touch his head and his face is very calming. It's very regulating. This just works for me. And it felt very sweet having him there with me as I was still trying to wrap up what I was feeling. And I don't mean wrap up, but to continue to process what I was feeling and just get regulated again. Historically, when I would go back out to talk with Steve, I would have made a very adamant case like an attorney about why what he did was wrong. And that's not what I did this time. And we sat down and we talked. He didn't understand why it activated me. And I started out by saying, it is really hard when you live with someone with PDA. I am really sorry. It is really hard. And I am sorry that it is very difficult. And we talked about it and he didn't quite understand. And I said, can you look at it through this perspective? And then I explained in summary what I've shared with you. Whether he understood it or not, he said, yeah, he could see that. And I said, I think we're going to need to talk about some better ways to transition when you've been gone and when you come back home. And we agreed that we were going to do that. And then it was time to walk the dogs and we took the dogs for a walk. Now, historically, I would not have come out of my room for a really long time. And I certainly wouldn't have gone on a walk with him. And I really believe that being able to allow whatever feelings are coming up, it really helped because I was able to process with Jen and to cry and to just release. I think a lot of it had to do with previous times when I felt this and didn't know what it was and just got angry and hurt and couldn't understand. And to work through it and then to have a calm, respectful conversation with Steve and to walk the dog, and things were fine after that. I think he's been more mindful about allowing me to have space. And he often wakes up in the morning about 4:30 and gets coffee, and there's a room in the back of the house that he sits in. And if it's a day where the newspaper comes out, he reads the paper. So by the time I get up, he's had a few hours to himself. And this morning he was going to golf and I went in the kitchen to fix myself some breakfast. And he usually doesn't eat breakfast as early as I do, but he did. And we sat at the table. And this is kind of my time to be on my phone. It's not that I don't want to talk, but it's my time. This is the equivalent of my cup of coffee and me reading the paper. And I think he understood that. But I had this gremlin or thought of, I'm not being a very good wife. I'm not being very social. But I think he's understanding that I just need a little bit more space these days. And as I'm getting clear about what I want and need and taking up that space, it has to be okay. And one of the things that I deeply appreciate about our relationship is Steve loves going to concerts. He loves going to Laughlin. Those are things that don't work for me. And I encourage him to do the things that he loves that fill him up. Just because I'm not the person to go with him doesn't mean that he can't either. He loves being on his own or he'll go with friends. I don't know that we've had to do a lot of grief work around this. And maybe that's something I need to talk to him about, but it's not uncommon with neurodivergent couples to have grief around the fact that we don't do certain vacations together and we don't do certain activities together, but that separateness is really okay. And often in the evenings, there's hockey on and he likes watching hockey. And as you may well guess, that's not really my thing. And he feels guilty going into the middle bedroom to watch hockey. And I'm like, it's fine. I have shows that I watch when he's not around. And I feel like I don't have to be as attentive to the TV when he's not around. And we really have found this balance of things that work. And it's not traditional. It's very non-traditional. And can we be okay with that? And for us, this has really worked. And there's new ways that we're growing and changing and just making those adaptations. My hope for you is that if there are areas where you feel like you push yourself a lot in that fear of what happens if you let go, I really get that feeling of what if things come unraveled and I can't get myself out. And I have to say that it feels really nice to feel so regulated. And I have to tell you that on Sunday night when we had this thing when he got home, I could feel how dysregulated my nervous system was. And I felt really angry. I felt like I had 8 days of bliss. And, within 5 minutes of him coming home, I'm dysregulated and my body feels tense. And it felt like nirvana was gone. And I worked through it. I'd be curious to ask you if there are areas where you push to keep order or structure. And I'm not asking you to be different. I'm not asking you to give any of those things up, but if it comes from a place of ease as opposed to tension because of fear, if you don't do it, what will happen? Is that something that you're curious about and would want to see what happens if you trusted yourself? I was really surprised. I ended up walking almost every day. I went to Aquafit. I think it may have been canceled one day. And it's so nice to be in this place that everything turned out okay. And for the time that between the dizziness that I had in December and then being sick for a month, not exercising, like my weight was fine. And as some of you know, I indulged in lots of comfort food and snacks during some of that time just because it was stressful to not feel well. And for me, coming from a history of having an eating disorder and being in a place now where I still use food sometimes, I'm human and that's what we're going to do, to really come full circle around for today in this moment, that I can trust myself and my food choices. And sometimes I indulge and enjoy what I want to have. And then I kind of swing back to eating in a way that is more supportive for my health. And I don't have to be exercising like crazy, and I can do activities that I love, and I can take a rest, and I don't have to do it all the time. And then I don't think I'm ever going to get back to it. And I consciously choose to do it. And I surprise myself that this is really a wish that I would have for everybody, where we're not driven by fear or performance or anxiety. And we really can settle into trusting ourselves. It does not happen overnight. I'm 60. I went through treatment for my eating disorder when I was 30. And I don't know how much of my eating disorder that really fixed. I think if you're a longtime listener, the therapist that I saw, who was the director of the recovery home, I saw her for at least 5 or 6 years after I was discharged. I was in the recovery home for almost a year. And during therapy, I would think about what I was going to binge on when therapy was over. Never occurred to me to say anything to her. We didn't talk about how dysregulated I was. You know, so it's not like I went through this treatment and all of a sudden didn't have an eating disorder anymore. It's a process, and we just learn to walk through and live with whatever it is that we have. I think that's all that I have. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's how you're wired. Whatever's going on, whatever your needs are, if it's for control and structure and routine and sameness, I get that. If it's for no sameness, no structure, no routine, I get that too. There is no right or wrong. I think we need to honor how we're wired, and we might want to look at, is there something underneath that that's driving it? Is it fear? Is it anxiety? Is it working for us? It's going to shift and change, most likely. And are you having peace? And are you having comfort? And is your nervous system regulated? I don't know that we can be in a place of constant regulation, but it sure feels nice when we're here. So however you're showing up in the world, whatever is going on, it's okay. You're okay. We have a right to be exactly who we are. I think that's all I have. Have a blessed day.